Liam Lawson is learning firsthand how quickly Helmut Marko's favour can shift. Just days after earning praise for his impressive point-scoring drive at the US Grand Prix, Marko voiced frustration over the Kiwi's aggressive approach against Sergio Perez, calling it too strong for his liking. Having spent the past year as Red Bull's reserve driver, Lawson rejoined the grid with VCARB and initially seemed to be in Marko's good books, but it only took one contentious on-track battle with Perez to remind him how volatile his position can be under Marko's watchful eye. Liam Lawson has since apologized to Sergio Perez after giving him the middle finger during their heated exchange at the Mexican Grand Prix. The incident took place on lap 19 at turn 4, where the Red Bull reserve was fighting tooth and nail to hold his position. After Perez nudged him wide during an attempted overtake, Lawson stayed on the throttle, leading to contact between the two at the following right-hander. The clash wasn't without consequences. Perez's car sustained damage to the floor edge and side pod, which, according to his team, shaved around 65 points of downforce from his Red Bull, a significant setback. Although Perez held his ground through the remainder of the lap, Lawson ultimately flew past him on the main straight, leaving Perez struggling with his wounded car. Reflecting on his actions, Lawson admitted it was a heat-of-the-moment decision. "It's obviously one of those in-the-moment things. He spent half the lap blocking me, trying to mess up my race, so I was frustrated, but he didn't offer any excuses. I shouldn't have done it, and I apologize for that." Helmut Marko wasn't thrilled with Lawson's aggressive style or the gesture that followed. "It was an unnecessary collision, where I see Lawson as more at fault," he commented. When asked if Lawson's assertiveness was a positive sign, Marko was clear. If it had been anyone else, sure, but not against the sister team. Lawson acknowledged that his approach likely didn't align with Marko's standards. "I don't think that's what Helmut likes. It's not my character, not something I should be doing." Perez, for his part, saw Lawson as entirely to blame for their turn 5 clash, suggesting Lawson could have avoided the contact. Lawson, however, felt he'd been left with no escape route. "I left him space into turn 4, coming in very late, honestly trying to avoid contact, but he drove me off, and by turn 5, there was nowhere for me to go. It's unfortunate, but I don't know where he expected me to go." Caught up in the heat of the moment, Lawson flashed Perez the finger as he passed, a gesture the cameras didn't miss. Reflecting afterward, Lawson acknowledged the gesture stemmed from frustration and admitted it was out of line, noting it was an impulsive reaction he regretted. As the engines cooled and volunteers swept up a sea of hot dog wrappers, the Mexican Grand Prix wrapped up for another year. And while the track may be quiet now, one question hangs in the air. Was this Sergio Perez's last home race in Mexico? Checo, fully in the moment, seemed to savor every second, especially as the stadium filled with the stirring notes of the Mexican national anthem, sung a cappella. One playful message made the rounds. Could Checo do any worse than last year's first corner disaster in Mexico City? It didn't take long for an answer. As Perez lined up his RB20 on the grid, all eyes were on him, but the day took a grim turn before it even began. Perez had crept forward well past his grid line, an error you'd expect from a rookie, not Mexico's hometown hero. If this was a sign of things to come, it was right on point. Checo's day only went downhill from there, marking yet another unfortunate chapter in his home Grand Prix journey. Perez's race took a nosedive when he was slapped with a 5-second penalty for his botched start. However, he wasted no time carving through the pack, shaking off the setback like dust off his visor. Just as he seemed to be on a recovery mission, Checo caught up to Liam Lawson, hovering near the points and fiercely guarding his position. Now, typically, Red Bull would wave Lawson aside to let a senior team driver through, but this time was different. With rumours swirling that Lawson is being evaluated as a potential Perez replacement, the gloves were off. Perez ended his race at the very back of the field, a crushing finale to what could be his last home Grand Prix. If this was indeed Sergio Perez's swan song at his home Grand Prix, it couldn't have been a more disastrous exit. For the Red Bull driver, the day's events unfolded like a cruel script, almost designed to nudge him toward retirement and spare him further embarrassment on the world stage. Meanwhile, over on the other side of the Red Bull garage, Max Verstappen was living a very different story. The reigning world champion found himself at the center of a storm, still riding high from his showdown at COTA, where he and Lando Norris clashed in a fierce wheel-to-wheel brawl. Both drivers pushed the limits and left the track in their epic duel. Yet it was Norris who faced the penalty for gaining an advantage off-track. The contrast between the teammates couldn't have been starker, with Verstappen reaping the rewards while Perez found himself buried in setbacks. Max. Throughout the week, F1 media buzzed with heated debate. Did Max Verstappen's dive on the inside of turn 12 at COTA qualify as a legitimate overtaking attempt, or was it a calculated move to block Norris from completing his pass? The discussions divided the paddock, with opinions split on whether Verstappen had been gaming the system or simply executing a bold defensive maneuver. In Mexico, it was as if fate had conspired for an encore of the Austin showdown. Verstappen and Norris once again found themselves vying for the same stretch of asphalt, reigniting the controversy. With the FIA's driving standards fresh in everyone's minds, race stewards in Mexico City didn't waste time reaching their decision, setting the tone for yet another chapter in the Verstappen-Norris rivalry. This time, it was Verstappen feeling the heat from race control over track limits. In a swift turn of events, the stewards came down hard, handing him 2 10-second penalties, double the punishment Norris faced just a week earlier in Texas. There, a 5-second penalty had cost Norris his podium spot, dropping him to P4. The Verstappen maneuvers are bound to fuel yet another round of debates in the F1 world. Despite positioning himself on the inside of the contentious corners once again, the stewards placed the blame squarely on the Red Bull driver's shoulders, marking a sharp shift in judgment from the previous race. Toto Wolff wasted no time weighing in, asserting that the stewards had clearly learned from their USGP missteps and set a new precedent on corner rights. A driver will always push to the limit, and when the rules, or their interpretation, open the door to a particular style of racing, someone like Max will always take full advantage, Wolff remarked in the paddock. His comment pointed to Verstappen's instinct for pushing boundaries, suggesting that the stewards' decisions had finally redefined what constitutes ownership of a corner in these high-stakes battles. Toto Wolff continued, suggesting the stewards had established a new benchmark that would shape racing standards going forward. "I think we've seen a shift in the interpretation and enforcement of these regulations," he commented. "This will likely change the way drivers approach these situations from now on. You won't see that anymore," Wolff elaborated, explaining that drivers would now be expected to leave room on the outside if another car is alongside, braking late, forcing the other car off, and then also going off track yourself. "I think that's off the table now," he said, believing that this stance would resonate with those who felt Austin's call on Norris had been unjust. However, this narrative isn't entirely accurate. While it might appease critics of the Austin outcome, the reality is that the F1 drivers met with the FIA for hours on Friday, discussing future stewarding standards. Yet, no immediate changes were set. The current guidelines, as outlined in the existing handbook, will remain in place for the rest of the season. New stewarding standards are likely coming, but they won't take effect until next year. Do you think Liam Lawson's aggressive stance with Sergio Perez was justified, especially with rumours of him potentially replacing Perez at Red Bull? And, given the FIA's recent penalty inconsistencies, should Red Bull let Lawson race with this kind of intensity against a senior team driver? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, goodbye for now.